The blood on her hands had long since dried, but Tabitha Everett could still feel its phantom warmth as she stood in the doorway of what remained of her father's store, watching the last wagon pull away from Dallas, Texas without her. It was August 1878, and the cholera outbreak that had ravaged the town for 3 months was finally over, taking with it 47 souls, including her father, mother, and younger brother. The survivors, terrified that the sickness still lingered in the buildings and water, had decided to abandon Dallas entirely, establishing a new settlement 15 miles west. They had given Tabitha 2 days to prepare, to gather what she could carry, but when the morning came, she found herself unable to leave the store her father had built with his own hands, unable to walk away from the only graves she would ever be able to visit. So she had stayed silent as the wagons rolled past, hidden in the shadows of the storage room, and now she stood alone in a town of ghosts. The August heat pressed down on her like a heavy quilt as Tabitha walked through the empty main street, her footsteps echoing off the abandoned storefronts. The Wells family's restaurant still had chairs scattered outside. The livery stable door swung open and shut in the breeze, creaking like an old man's bones. Even the church, where Reverend Matthews had preached every Sunday for 12 years, stood silent and hollow. She was 22 years old, and she had just chosen death over leaving her family's memory behind. Tabitha spent the first week taking inventory of what remained. The general store still had supplies, though she would need to ration carefully. There was a well behind the building that her father had dug himself, and she prayed the water was clean. The vegetable garden her mother had kept was overgrown but salvageable. She could survive here, perhaps for months, but then what? She tried not to think about the then what. On the 8th day, she heard the horse. Tabitha was in the garden, pulling weeds in the early morning coolness, when the sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. Her first thought was Indians, though the Comanche had not raided this area in years. Her second thought was outlaws, which seemed far more likely. An abandoned town would be perfect for men who wanted to disappear. She grabbed the hunting rifle she now kept within reach at all times and moved quickly to the back door of the store, positioning herself where she could see the street without being easily visible. The rider came into view slowly, and Tabitha's breath caught. He sat tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. He wore dusty trail clothes and a worn hat, and he led a pack horse behind him. But what made her heart skip was the way he rode, scanning the empty buildings with a careful, methodical attention that spoke of either law enforcement or military training. The rider stopped in front of the general store, dismounting with an easy grace. He tied both horses to the hitching post and stood for a moment, hands on his hips, looking up and down the abandoned street. "Hello," he called out, his voice deep and carrying. "Anyone here?" Tabitha remained silent, the rifle steady in her hands. The man walked up onto the store's porch, his boots heavy on the wood. "I am not here to cause trouble," he said, louder now. "Name is Owen Sanders. I am looking for someone." Still, Tabitha said nothing. Owen Sanders pushed open the store's door, which Tabitha had left unlocked because what was the point of locks in a ghost town? She heard him walk inside, heard his footsteps moving through the aisles. "Miss Tabitha Everett," he called out. "If you are here, I need to speak with you." "Your cousin Martha sent me." Tabitha's finger loosened on the trigger. Martha. Her mother's niece, who had moved to Austin 3 years ago with her husband, Martha Donnelly, married to James Donnelly, Owen continued. "She got word about what happened here, about the cholera. She heard the town was abandoned. She is worried sick about you, sent me to find you and bring you back to Austin if you are willing." Tabitha set the rifle down carefully and stepped out of the storage room, her heart pounding. Owen Sanders spun at the sound, his hand moving instinctively toward the pistol at his hip before stopping when he saw her. They stared at each other for a long moment. He was older than she had first thought, probably around 30, with gray eyes that held a wariness she recognized because she saw it in her own reflection every day. There was a scar on his left cheekbone, and his hands had the calluses of a man who worked hard for his living. "You are Tabitha Everett?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "I am," she said, surprised by how rough her own voice sounded. She had not spoken to another person in 8 days. Owen removed his hat, holding it in front of him. "I am sorry about your family, miss. Martha told me what happened. About your parents and your brother." The sympathy in his voice made something crack inside her chest, but Tabitha held herself rigid. She could not afford to break down, not now. "How do you know Martha?" "I work for her husband sometimes. Ranch hand mostly, but I do other jobs when they need doing. When she got the letter about Dallas being abandoned, she asked me to ride out here and look for you. That was 4 days ago." "Why would you do that? Ride all this way for a stranger?" Owen's mouth quirked in something that was not quite a smile. "Martha can be very persuasive, and she was clear that if I found you, I was not to come back without you unless you specifically refused to come." "I refuse," Tabitha said immediately. Owen nodded slowly, as if he had expected this. "May I ask why? This is my home. My family is buried here. I'm not leaving them." "Miss Everett, I understand, but you cannot stay here alone. It is not safe. There is no law, no protection, and when word gets out that this town is empty, you will have all manner of trouble riding through." "I can handle myself," Tabitha said, though even she could hear how hollow the words sounded. Owen looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, some decision being made. "How about this?" he said. "Let me stay the night. My horses need rest, and I could use a meal that is not jerky and hard biscuits. Tomorrow morning, if you still want me to leave, I will go. But at least give me a chance to make Martha's case properly." Tabitha wanted to say no, wanted to send this stranger away and return to her solitude. But the truth was, hearing another human voice had reminded her just how desperately lonely she had been, how heavy the silence had become. "You can stay in the boarding house across the street," she said finally. "The beds should still be clean. I will bring you some food." "I would rather earn my keep," Owen said. "You must have work that needs doing around here. Let me help." And that was how Owen Sanders entered Tabitha Everett's life, with an offer of help she did not want to need but could not quite refuse. That evening, Tabitha made stew from the vegetables in the garden and salt pork from the store's supplies while Owen tended to his horses, and then fixed the broken step on the store's front porch that had been bothering her for weeks. They ate together at the small table in the back room where Tabitha's family used to take their meals, and the normalcy of it, the simple act of sharing food with another person, made her chest ache. "How long have you been working for Martha's husband?" Tabitha asked, more to fill the silence than from real curiosity. "About 2 years," Owen said. "Before that I was in the Army stationed at Fort Worth. When my enlistment was up, I decided I had had enough of taking orders and drifted for a while. James gave me a job when I needed it, and I have stayed." "Do you like it?" "The ranch work," Owen shrugged. "It is honest work. The Donnellys are good people. Could be worse." "That is not really an answer." He looked up from his stew, and for the first time she saw a hint of amusement in his eyes. "I suppose it is not. Truth is, I like the work fine, but I am not much for staying in one place. Got used to moving around, I guess. But everyone has to settle somewhere eventually, and there are worse places than Austin." "Did you have family?" Before the army, the amusement faded from his eyes. Had a brother. He died at Shiloh. Parents passed when I was young. It has been just me for a long time now. I am sorry, Tabitha said and meant it. Seems we have that in common, Owen said quietly. Being alone. They finished the meal in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than Tabitha had experienced in the past week, less suffocating somehow. When Owen excused himself to go to the boarding house, Tabitha found herself disappointed to see him go. She lay awake that night in the small bedroom above the store, listening to the familiar creaks and groans of the building, and thought about what Owen had said. He was right, of course. Staying here was foolish, probably suicidal. But the thought of leaving, of walking away from her father's store and her family's graves, felt like a betrayal she could not commit. When morning came, Tabitha expected to find Owen saddling his horses, preparing to leave as she had insisted. Instead, she found him in the garden, already working in the cool dawn light, repairing the fence that the wind had damaged during a storm 2 weeks ago. "What are you doing?" she called from the back door. Owen looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Fence was broken. Figured I would fix it." "I told you I wanted you to leave." "You did," Owen agreed, "but I got to thinking. Martha asked me to bring you back to Austin, and I mean to do that, but I can see you are not ready to leave yet. So I figure I will stay a while, help you get things sorted here, and maybe you will change your mind. And if I do not, then at least I will know I tried. Besides, it is not like I have anywhere pressing to be." Tabitha wanted to argue to send him away, but watching him work on the fence with steady, capable hands, she felt something inside her ease just slightly. She had been carrying the weight of this abandoned town alone for too long. "There is coffee on the stove," she said finally. "And eggs if you want them." Owen's answering smile was small but genuine, and Tabitha felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Owen worked from sunrise to sunset, fixing everything in the town that was broken and tending to things that simply needed maintenance. He repaired the roof on the church, cleared the debris from the main street, and even got the old windmill behind the livery working again. Tabitha found herself working alongside him more often than not, holding boards while he hammered, or helping to haul water for the garden. They talked while they worked, carefully at first, then with increasing ease. Owen told her about his time in the army, about the places he had seen, and the things he had done. He spoke of his brother Thomas, who had been 2 years younger and had dreamed of being a teacher before the war took him. Tabitha found herself sharing memories of her own family in return, stories about her father's terrible jokes and her mother's beautiful singing voice, about her brother Samuel, who had been only 14 when the cholera took him. "He wanted to be a doctor," Tabitha said one afternoon as they worked together to clear out the old well house. "He used to follow Doc Henderson around like a puppy, asking questions about everything. Doc said Samuel had a real gift for it, that he could have been something special." "Sounds like he was already something special," Owen said quietly. Tabitha had to turn away to hide the tears that suddenly blurred her vision. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Owen never mentioned leaving, and Tabitha stopped bringing it up. She told herself it was practical, that having help around the town made sense, but she knew the truth was more complicated than that. She had started looking forward to seeing Owen each morning, started listening for the sound of his voice. When he smiled at something she said, she felt warm in a way that had nothing to do with the Texas heat. It was dangerous, she knew, to let herself feel this way. Owen would leave eventually, would ride back to Austin and his job at the Donnelly Ranch, and she would be alone again. But knowing that did not seem to stop her heart from racing when he stood close to her, did not prevent the flush that crept up her neck when their hands accidentally touched. One evening in early September, as they sat on the store's porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Owen said, "I have been here almost a month now." Tabitha's stomach tightened. "I know. Martha is probably wondering if I died along the way. Probably." Owen was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on his knees. "I should head back to Austin soon. Let her know you are all right at least." "All right," Tabitha said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Thing is," Owen continued, "I do not much want to go." Tabitha turned to look at him, her heart pounding. "Why not?" Owen met her gaze, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. "I think you know why, Tabitha." Her name on his lips sounded different than it ever had before, intimate and weighted with meaning. "Owen," she started, but she did not know how to finish. "I am not good with words," Owen said. "Never have been. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. When I rode into this town a month ago, I was just doing a job, planning to find you and convince you to come back with me. But then I met you, and I saw how strong you are, how brave. Staying here alone, tending your family's graves, refusing to abandon what matters to you even when everyone else did. That takes a kind of courage I have not seen in many men, let alone a woman alone in an empty town." "I am not brave," Tabitha whispered. "I am just stubborn." "You are both," Owen said, and there was warmth in his voice now. "And somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about this as a job and started thinking about what it would be like to stay here with you, if you would want that." Tabitha's hands were shaking. She clasped them together tightly in her lap. "Owen, you cannot want to stay here. This is a dead town. There is no future here." "Maybe not," Owen agreed. "But there could be a future somewhere else. Austin, maybe, or anywhere you wanted to go." "The point is not the place, Tabitha. It is the person. You barely know me." "I know enough," Owen said. "I know you are kind even when you are hurting. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you make the best coffee I have ever had, and that you sing to yourself when you think no one is listening. I know that when you smile, which is not often enough, it feels like the sun coming out from behind clouds. And I know that I have not felt this way about anyone in my entire life." Tabitha could not breathe. The hope that was rising in her chest felt too big, too fragile. "What are you saying?" Owen reached over and gently took one of her hands in his. His palm was warm and rough with calluses, and the touch sent electricity racing up her arm. "I am saying that I have fallen in love with you, Tabitha Everett. And if there is any chance you might feel the same way, I would like to court you properly. I would like to see if we could build something together, a real future. Not here in Dallas, maybe, but somewhere. Together." Tabitha looked down at their joined hands, then up at Owen's face, at the hope and fear and longing she saw there. She thought about the past month, about how much lighter the days had felt with him beside her, how the silence had become companionable instead of oppressive. She thought about the way her heart lifted every morning when she heard his voice, the way she had started taking more care with her appearance even though there was no one to see except him. "I am scared," she admitted. "Everyone I have ever loved has left me, one way or another." "I know," Owen said. "And I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen, because life does not work that way. But I can promise that I will not leave you by choice. I can promise that if you give me a chance, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of it." Tabitha felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for the first time in months, they were not tears of grief. "I think I have fallen in love with you too," she whispered. "I did not want to. I tried not to. But somewhere between you fixing that fence and making terrible jokes while we worked, it just happened." Owen's smile was like sunrise, bright and full of joy. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "So, is that a yes, to courting?" "Yes," Tabitha said, and felt something inside her that had been frozen since her family died begin to thaw. "But Owen, I need to ask you something first. Anything. If we do this, if we build a future together, I need to know you are choosing me because you want to, not because you feel sorry for me or feel obligated because Martha asked you to help." Owen shook his head firmly. "Tabitha, I stopped feeling obligated about 2 days after I got here. And I have never felt sorry for you, not once. Sympathy for what you have been through, yes, but not pity. You are too strong for that. I am choosing you because when I think about my future, about what I want my life to look like, you are in every single picture I see." The conviction in his voice dissolved the last of Tabitha's doubts. She squeezed his hand, feeling the rightness of it settle deep in her bones. "Then yes, I want to try this with you." Owen pulled her gently toward him, and Tabitha went willingly, letting him wrap his arms around her. She pressed her face against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, leather and soap and something uniquely Owen. His heart beat steadily beneath her cheek, and she felt safer than she had in months. They sat like that, until the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge, holding each other in the gathering darkness of the empty town. Over the next few days, they began to make plans. Owen rode to the nearest settlement to send a telegram to Martha, letting her know that Tabitha was safe and that they would be coming to Austin together soon. When he returned, he brought supplies and news that made Tabitha's decision easier. "Ran into some folks at the settlement," he said as they sat together in the store, going through the inventory lists. "They have heard about Dallas being abandoned. Said there are already scavengers talking about coming out here to strip what they can from the buildings. It is only a matter of time before this place gets picked clean or worse." Tabitha looked around the store that had been her whole world for so long. The shelves her father had built, the counter where her mother had kept the account books, the corner where Samuel used to sit and read when business was slow. It hurt to think of strangers taking it all apart, but she knew Owen was right. Dallas was already gone, kept alive only in her memory and her stubborn refusal to let go. "I want to visit their graves one more time," she said quietly, "before we leave." "Of course," Owen said. "Take all the time you need." They went together the next morning, walking to the small cemetery on the edge of town where Tabitha's family lay buried beside 44 others who had died in the cholera outbreak. Tabitha knelt before the 3 graves, tracing the names carved into the simple wooden markers. John Everett, loving father; Margaret Everett, devoted mother; Samuel Everett, beloved son. "I am sorry I am leaving," she whispered. "But I cannot stay here anymore. I cannot keep living in the past no matter how much I want to. I think you would understand. I think you would want me to be happy." Owen stood a respectful distance away, giving her privacy, but close enough that she could feel his presence like a warm anchor. When she finally stood, brushing dirt from her skirt, he came to her side. "They would be proud of you," he said gently. "You did not know them." "No, but I know you. And any parents who raise someone as strong and good as you would be proud." Tabitha leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I am ready to leave now. Not today, but soon. I want to pack up the things that matter, the things I want to keep. And then I want to go to Austin with you and start building that future we talked about." Owen kissed the top of her head. "We will take it at your pace. No rushing." It took them a week to prepare. Tabitha went through the store carefully, selecting items that held meaning. Her mother's china, carefully wrapped and packed. Her father's favorite pipe and his account books, which contained years of his meticulous handwriting. Samuel's collection of medical books, which she could not bear to leave behind. Personal items from their rooms upstairs. Photographs and clothing and small treasures that would have meant nothing to anyone else, but were priceless to her. Owen helped her pack everything onto his spare horse and the wagon they had found at the livery stable. He was patient and gentle, never pushing her, always ready with a strong shoulder when the grief became too much. On their last night in Dallas, they ate dinner in the store one final time. Tabitha had cooked her mother's recipe for chicken and dumplings, and as they ate, she told Owen stories about her childhood, about the life this building had held. "My father opened this store when I was 5, she said. We had just moved to Dallas, and it was barely a town then, just a few buildings and big dreams. He used to say that every person who walked through that door was a neighbor, not a customer, and he should treat them accordingly. During the war, when supplies were scarce, he extended credit to families who could not pay, kept track in his books but never demanded payment. Some people never did pay him back, but he never seemed to mind. He sounds like he was a good man," Owen said. "He was. They all were. Good people who deserved longer lives." Tabitha looked around the store, memorizing every detail. "I used to think I would run this place someday, that I would take over when my father got too old. Samuel would be the doctor, and we would both stay here in Dallas, raising our families, growing old in the town we loved. It seems foolish now, how sure I was that the future would work out the way I planned." Owen reached across the table and took her hand. "It is not foolish to dream, Tabitha. Life did not go the way you planned, but that does not mean those dreams were wrong. It just means you get to dream new dreams now." "With you," Tabitha said, and it was not a question. "With me," Owen confirmed, "if you will have me." That night, after Owen had gone to the boarding house, Tabitha walked through the store one last time, running her hands over the familiar surfaces, saying goodbye to the ghosts that lived in every corner. She cried, but they were cleansing tears, the kind that washed away some of the grief and made room for something new. Tomorrow, she would leave Dallas behind, but she would carry it with her always in her memories and her heart. They left at dawn, as the sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky pink and gold. Tabitha sat on the wagon bench beside Owen, her packed belongings secured in the back, and looked at the town one last time. The empty building stood silent in the early morning light, already taking on the abandoned look of a place being reclaimed by the desert. But Tabitha did not feel abandoned anymore. She had Owen beside her, solid and real in hers, and ahead of them lay Austin and Martha and the possibility of a new life. The town had left her behind, but Owen had ridden back, and now he was bringing her forward into a future she had not dared to imagine. "Ready?" Owen asked gently. Tabitha took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready." Owen clicked his tongue to the horses, and the wagon began to roll. Tabitha did not look back. The journey to Austin took 5 days of steady travel. They camped at night under the vast Texas sky, and Owen proved to be an excellent traveling companion. He was good at making camp, at finding the best spots near water and shade. He told stories while they rode, making Tabitha laugh with tales of mishaps during his army days or absurd things that had happened at the Donnelly Ranch. But there were quiet moments, too, comfortable silences where they simply enjoyed each other's presence. Owen taught Tabitha to read the stars for navigation, pointing out constellations and explaining how to use them to find your way. Tabitha shared more memories of her family, and found that talking about them with Owen made the grief easier to bear. As if by sharing the stories, she was keeping her family alive in a new way. On the third night, as they sat by the campfire after dinner, Owen asked, "What do you want to do when we get to Austin? I mean, besides seeing Martha?" Tabitha had been thinking about this. "I would like to find work if I can. I have experience running a store and I am good with numbers." Maybe I could keep books for someone or work in a shop." "You do not have to work if you do not want to," Owen said carefully. "I make enough that we could manage." "We?" Tabitha raised an eyebrow. "That is presumptuous of you, Owen Sanders. I do not recall agreeing to marry you yet." Owen's eyes widened and a flush crept up his neck. "I did not mean to presume. I just thought, that is, I hoped that eventually we might." Tabitha laughed, the sound surprising them both. It had been so long since she had teased someone, since she had felt light enough to joke. "I am teasing you, Owen, though you are right that you have not actually asked me properly." "I want to do things right," Owen said seriously. "I want to court you properly first, let you get settled in Austin, give you time to be sure. This is all happening so fast, and I do not want you to feel rushed or pressured." Tabitha's heart swelled with affection for this careful, considerate man. "What if I do not want to wait, Tabitha?" "I am not saying we should get married tomorrow," she interrupted. "But I am saying that I know my own mind, Owen. I have had enough of my life taken from me, enough time wasted on things I could not control. I do not want to waste any more time being cautious when I know what I want." Owen moved closer to her on the log they were using as a bench. "And what do you want, you?" Tabitha said simply. "I want a life with you, whatever that looks like. I want to wake up next to you and go to sleep beside you and build something real and lasting. I want to stop being so afraid of losing people that I hold myself back from loving them." Owen cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "I love you, Tabitha Everett, more than I thought I could love anyone." "I love you too," Tabitha breathed, and then Owen was kissing her, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was Tabitha's first real kiss, and it felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Will you marry me?" he asked quietly. "Not tomorrow, but when you are ready. Will you be my wife?" "Yes," Tabitha said, joy bubbling up in her chest. "Yes, I will marry you." They stayed up late that night, making plans and dreaming together. Owen told her about a piece of land he had been saving money to buy, a small plot just outside Austin where they could build a house. Tabitha described the kind of home she wanted, simple but sturdy with a big kitchen and a garden. "And children?" Owen asked tentatively. "Do you want children?" Tabitha thought of Samuel, of the brother she had lost, of her parents who would never meet their grandchildren. "Yes," she said. "Someday. A whole houseful of them, if we are lucky." Owen smiled and pulled her close, and Tabitha felt the last piece of her broken heart slot back into place. They arrived in Austin on a warm September afternoon, and Martha Donnelly was waiting for them at the ranch with tears streaming down her face. She pulled Tabitha into a fierce embrace the moment she climbed down from the wagon. "Thank God," Martha sobbed. "Thank God you are all right. When I heard about Dallas, I was so worried. I am so sorry about your parents, about Samuel. I am so sorry." Tabitha held her cousin tightly, drawing comfort from the familiar warmth of family. Martha was 5 years older than Tabitha, with dark hair and kind eyes, and they had been close as children. "Thank you for sending Owen," Tabitha said quietly. "I do not know what would have happened if he had not come." Martha pulled back, wiping her eyes, and looked between Tabitha and Owen with growing understanding. They were standing close together, not quite touching but clearly connected in some invisible way. Owen's hand hovered protectively near Tabitha's back, and Tabitha kept glancing at him as if to reassure herself he was still there. "Oh," Martha said, and a smile broke through her tears. "Oh, I see, James, come here. You need to see this." Martha's husband, a tall man with sandy hair and a weathered face, came out of the ranch house. He took in the scene with one quick glance and started to laugh. "Well, I will be damned. I send you to fetch my wife's cousin and you come back engaged." "We are not engaged," Owen started, but Tabitha interrupted him. "Actually, we are. He asked me 3 nights ago, and I said yes." Owen looked at her in surprise. "I thought you wanted to wait before telling people." "I changed my mind," Tabitha said, smiling up at him. "Why wait?" Martha squealed and hugged them both again, talking a mile a minute about wedding plans and what they would need. James clapped Owen on the shoulder, congratulating him, and for a moment the happiness was so overwhelming that Tabitha felt dizzy with it. Martha and James insisted that Tabitha stay with them at the ranch house while she got settled in Austin, and Tabitha gratefully accepted. The ranch was beautiful, sprawling acres of land with cattle grazing in the distance, and a solid, well-built house that spoke of prosperity and care. Over dinner that evening, surrounded by Martha and James and several of the ranch hands who came in for the meal, Tabitha felt something she had not felt in months. She felt like she belonged somewhere again. These people welcomed her with open arms, asking about her journey and expressing sympathy for her loss without dwelling on it until she felt smothered. Owen sat beside her, and under the table, his hand found hers and squeezed gently. Tabitha squeezed back, grateful beyond words for this man who had ridden into her life and changed everything. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Tabitha helped Martha around the ranch house and got to know the rhythms of her new home. She met with the local minister about wedding arrangements and started planning a simple ceremony for late October. Owen continued his work on the ranch, but spent every free moment with Tabitha, and they fell more deeply in love with each passing day. One afternoon, Owen took Tabitha to see the land he wanted to buy. It was a beautiful spot, with a creek running through it and a grove of oak trees that provided shade. Tabitha could picture their house there, could imagine children playing in the yard and a garden flourishing in the rich soil. "It is perfect," she told Owen and watched his face light up with pleasure. "You really think so? Because if you want to live in town instead or somewhere else entirely, we can look at other options." "Owen," Tabitha said, putting her hands on his chest and looking up at him. "This is perfect because it is what you want, and I want to build a life with you. The where matters less than the who." Owen kissed her then, long and deep, and when they finally broke apart, they were both smiling like fools. The wedding took place on October 28, 1878, in the small church in Austin. Martha helped Tabitha make a dress from soft cream-colored fabric, with lace at the collar and cuffs. It was not fancy, but Tabitha felt beautiful wearing it, especially when she saw the look on Owen's face as she walked down the aisle toward him. They spoke their vows in clear, strong voices, promising to love and cherish each other for better or worse, in sickness and health, until death parted them. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed Tabitha with such tenderness that several people in the small congregation wiped away tears. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful, with food and dancing and well wishes from the community that was already starting to feel like home. Martha cried happy tears, and James made a speech about how he had known something good would come from sending Owen to Dallas, though he had not expected it to be a wife. But the best moment came late in the evening, when Owen and Tabitha finally escaped to the small room they would occupy at the ranch until their house was built. Owen carried Tabitha over the threshold, both of them laughing, and then set her down gently. "Hello, Mrs. Sanders," he said softly. "Hello, Mr. Sanders," Tabitha replied, and felt a thrill run through her at the newness of it, the rightness of being Owen's wife. They made love for the first time that night, gentle and awkward and perfect, learning each other's bodies with patient hands and whispered words. Afterward, Tabitha lay in Owen's arms and felt a peace she had not known was possible. "I love you," she murmured against his chest. "I love you too." Owen replied, his arms tightening around her. "Forever, Tabitha, I promise you that." The months that followed were busy and happy. Owen and Tabitha worked together to build their house on the land outside Austin, with help from James and several of the ranch hands. It was hard work, physical and exhausting, but satisfying in a way Tabitha had never experienced. Every nail she hammered, every board she helped position, was a piece of their future taking solid shape. The house went up slowly through the winter and into the spring of 1879. It was a simple structure, 2 stories with a big kitchen just as Tabitha had wanted, and a wide front porch where they could sit in the evenings. They moved in during May, carrying in the furniture they had built and bought, arranging Tabitha's family belongings in places of honor. Her mother's china went in the kitchen cupboard. Her father's pipe was displayed on the mantel of the fireplace Owen had built with his own hands. Samuel's medical books lined a shelf in what would someday be a child's room, waiting for a son or daughter who might have the same dreams Samuel had held. Tabitha planted a garden behind the house, and as she worked the soil, she found herself talking to her lost family, telling them about her new life and the happiness she had found. She liked to think they could hear her, that they were glad she had found love after so much loss. Owen proved to be an attentive and loving husband. He never took Tabitha for granted, always treating her with respect and kindness. He remembered small things, like how she preferred her coffee or that she loved wildflowers. He made her laugh with his dry humor and held her when the grief for her family still occasionally overwhelmed her. In turn, Tabitha worked hard to be a good wife. She managed their household efficiently, kept their accounts in perfect order, and created a warm, welcoming home. She learned to cook the foods Owen loved and surprised him sometimes with new recipes. She tended his clothes and helped with the outdoor work, proving herself a capable partner in every way. But more than any of that, they simply loved each other. They talked about everything, sharing dreams and fears and everyday observations. They developed private jokes and comfortable routines. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, but they always worked through it with honesty and respect. As summer gave way to fall, Tabitha began to suspect that she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure, not wanting to raise Owen's hopes prematurely, but when her suspicions were confirmed by the local doctor, she could barely contain her excitement. She told Owen on a Sunday evening in October, exactly a year after their wedding. They were sitting on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, when Tabitha said, "I have some news." Owen looked at her, and something in her tone must have alerted him because his whole body went still. "What kind of news?" "The good kind," Tabitha said, smiling. "Owen, I am expecting a baby. You are going to be a father." The look on Owen's face was something Tabitha would treasure for the rest of her life. Wonder and joy and a touch of fear all mixed together, creating an expression of such pure emotion that it made her eyes sting with tears. "A baby," he said, his voice rough. "Truly, truly." The doctor confirmed it today. He thinks the baby will come in May, around the time we moved into the house. Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly that Tabitha could feel his heart pounding against her cheek. "I love you," he said fiercely. "I love you so much, Tabitha. Thank you. Thank you for this, for everything." They sat together as darkness fell, making plans and dreaming about the child who would join their family. Owen's hand rested on Tabitha's belly, which did not yet show any sign of the life growing inside, and Tabitha covered his hand with hers. "What do you hope for?" Owen asked. "Boy or girl, I do not care," Tabitha said honestly. "As long as the baby is healthy, I will be happy either way." "Me too," Owen agreed. Though I will admit I have been imagining a boy, teaching him to ride, to work with his hands, to be a good man. And if it is a girl, Owen smiled, then I will teach her all those things too, and I will make sure she knows she can be anything she wants to be, do anything she sets her mind to, like her mother. Tabitha leaned up and kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. A year ago, she had been alone in a ghost town, convinced her life was over. Now she had a husband who cherished her, a home she loved, and a baby on the way. Life had brought her forward in ways she never could have imagined. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter. Tabitha continued her regular activities, though Owen fussed over her constantly, trying to convince her to rest more. She ignored most of his concerns, knowing her body's limits and refusing to be treated like an invalid. Martha was thrilled about the baby and had already started knitting tiny clothes. She shared advice from her own 2 pregnancies, which Tabitha appreciated even if some of it was contradictory or superstitious. James and the ranch hands treated Tabitha with gentle respect, and several of them started carving wooden toys for the baby, each trying to outdo the others. As Tabitha's belly grew, she found herself thinking often about her mother, wishing Margaret could have been there to share this experience. She would have loved being a grandmother, Tabitha thought. She would have been full of wisdom and practical advice, and she would have spoiled the baby terribly. One night in March, as Tabitha lay in bed with Owen's hand resting on her swollen belly, the baby kicked hard enough that Owen could feel it. His eyes went wide with wonder, and he moved his hand to follow the movement. "That is our child," he said, sounding awed. "Moving around in there, already making their presence known." "Takes after you then," Tabitha teased, stubborn and insistent. "I was going to say takes after you," Owen retorted, but he was smiling. The baby kicked again, and they both laughed, caught up in the miracle of it. Tabitha went into labor on a warm May evening, just as the doctor had predicted. Martha came to stay with her while Owen paced anxiously outside, and the long night that followed tested Tabitha's strength in ways she had not anticipated. Labor was hard and painful, and there were moments when Tabitha was not sure she could continue. But Martha held her hand and encouraged her, and the thought of meeting her child gave her the strength to push through. Finally, as dawn was breaking, Tabitha's son entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to everyone's eyes. The doctor cleaned him up and placed him in Tabitha's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "Owen," she called, her voice weak but full of joy. "Come meet your son." Owen came into the room looking pale and terrified, but when he saw Tabitha holding the baby, his face transformed. He approached slowly, as if afraid to disturb the moment, and looked down at his son with wonder written all over his face. "He is perfect," Owen whispered. "Tabitha, he is perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Tabitha asked, and carefully transferred the baby into Owen's arms. Owen cradled the tiny body against his chest with infinite care, and Tabitha watched as her strong, capable husband was completely undone by 10 pounds of humanity. Tears ran down Owen's face unchecked as he studied every detail of his son's face. "Hello, little one," Owen said softly. "I am your papa, and I promise you I am going to do everything I can to be the father you deserve." They named him Thomas Samuel Sanders, after both their lost brothers. It felt right to Tabitha, honoring the memory of those who had gone before while celebrating the new life they had created. Owen agreed immediately, his voice thick with emotion when Tabitha suggested the name. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong. He had Owen's gray eyes and Tabitha's dark hair, and he seemed to grow noticeably every day. Owen was a devoted father, taking to the role with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. He would walk Thomas around the house in the middle of the night when the baby fussed, singing old army songs in his rough voice until Thomas fell back asleep. Tabitha recovered from the birth quickly, eager to return to managing the household. She loved being a mother, loved the weight of Thomas in her arms and the sweet smell of his skin. She loved watching Owen with their son, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed. The first year of Thomas's life was exhausting but wonderful. Tabitha and Owen were sleep-deprived and constantly busy, but they had never been happier. They celebrated Thomas's first Christmas with Martha and James, and when the baby laughed for the first time in February, they both stopped what they were doing to soak in the joyful sound. By the time Thomas turned 1, Tabitha was pregnant again. This time the news was less surprising but no less joyful. Owen swept her up in his arms and spun her around, making her laugh and scold him for being reckless with her pregnant self. Their daughter, Rebecca Ann Sanders, was born in January of 1881. She was smaller than Thomas had been, with a cap of red gold hair that came from neither parent and green eyes that reminded Tabitha of her own mother. If Thomas had been an easy baby, Rebecca was determined to be different. She cried more, demanded more attention, and had a stubborn streak a mile wide. "She is definitely yours," Owen told Tabitha one night as they both tried to soothe the fussy infant. "I was going to say she is definitely yours," Tabitha replied, but she was smiling. Life with 2 small children was chaotic and demanding. The house was always noisy now, filled with Thomas's toddler chatter and Rebecca's cries and laughter. Tabitha sometimes felt like she was constantly in motion, feeding someone or changing someone or cleaning up after someone. But when she took a moment to step back and look at what she and Owen had built, she was overwhelmed with gratitude. They had created a family, a real, loving, noisy family. After all the loss she had experienced, after standing alone in that abandoned town and thinking her life was over, she had somehow found her way to this. A husband who loved her completely, 2 beautiful children, and a home full of warmth and life. Owen seemed to be thinking along the same lines one evening after they had finally gotten both children to sleep. They sat together on their porch, as had become their habit, and Owen pulled Tabitha close against his side. "You remember the day I rode into Dallas?" he asked quietly. "Of course I do. I almost shot you." Owen chuckled. "I remember seeing you in that store, looking so fierce and stubborn and alone. I remember thinking that convincing you to leave was going to be impossible. You were nearly right." "And now look at us," Owen said, gesturing at the house behind them where their children slept. "A house, a family, a life together. Sometimes I still cannot quite believe it is real." Tabitha turned to look at him, seeing the love and contentment in his face. "It is real, Owen. We made it real together. Best decision I ever made staying in that town with you," Owen said. "Best thing that ever happened to me was falling in love with Tabitha Everett." "Sanders," Tabitha corrected gently. "Tabitha Sanders." "Right," Owen said and kissed her. "Though you will always be that stubborn woman who refused to leave her father's store in my memory. And you will always be the cowboy who rode back when everyone else rode away," Tabitha replied. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Tabitha thought about the journey that had brought them here, about the pain and loss that had reshaped her life. She would never stop missing her parents and Samuel, would never stop grieving what could have been. But she had learned that it was possible to hold grief and joy in the same heart, to honor the past while building a future. The town had left her behind, but Owen had ridden back. And in doing so, he had brought her forward into a life more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. The years continued to pass, marked by the steady rhythm of family life. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who followed Owen everywhere, wanting to learn everything his father could teach him. Rebecca became a force of nature, fearless and determined, keeping both her parents on their toes. When Thomas was 6 and Rebecca was 4, Tabitha had another son, whom they named James Matthew Sanders after Martha's husband and the grandfather the boy would never meet. He was a calm baby, easy-going and happy, and he seemed to balance out Rebecca's intensity perfectly. Owen thrived as a father. He was patient and loving, firm when necessary but always fair. He taught Thomas to ride and to work with his hands, just as he had imagined. He taught Rebecca too, refusing to limit his daughter's education based on her gender. He read to all 3 children every night, his deep voice bringing stories to life in their cozy living room. Tabitha watched her family grow with deep satisfaction. She had found her calling in motherhood, in creating a safe, loving home where her children could flourish. But she also maintained her own interests and abilities. She kept the household accounts and helped Owen make decisions about the land and their livestock. She was known in Austin as someone who could be counted on for solid advice and practical help. Martha remained a close friend and frequent visitor, and their children grew up together like cousins. James and Owen became close as well, partners in various ventures and good friends who respected each other deeply. One Sunday in the summer of 1887, Tabitha and Owen hosted a gathering at their home for Martha and James and several other families from the area. The house was full of laughter and conversation, children running through the yard, women sharing recipes and news in the kitchen, while the men discussed cattle prices and weather on the porch. Tabitha moved through it all with practiced ease, making sure everyone had enough to eat and drink, settling disputes between overexcited children, and soaking in the warmth of community. This was so different from the isolation of that abandoned town, so opposite of the loneliness she had once thought would be her permanent state. As evening fell, and the guests began to depart, Tabitha stood in her doorway saying goodbye. Owen came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Good day," he asked. "Wonderful day," Tabitha confirmed. "Though I am exhausted. I am not surprised. You have been running since dawn." Tabitha leaned back against him, comfortable in his embrace. "It is worth it, though, having people here, filling our home with life and laughter. I never want to take that for granted." Owen turned her gently to face him, his expression serious. "You ever think about Dallas, about the life you left behind?" "Sometimes," Tabitha admitted. "Especially when I look at our children and think about how my parents never got to meet them, how Samuel never got to grow up and have his own family. But then I think about how they would have wanted me to be happy, to live a full life. And I am, Owen, I am so happy." "Me too," Owen said softly. "Every single day I wake up grateful that Martha sent me to that town, grateful that you gave me a chance." "You saved me," Tabitha said, the words thick with emotion. "I did not want to admit it at the time, but you did. I was dying in that empty town, even if my heart was still beating. You brought me back to life." "We saved each other," Owen corrected. "I was just drifting before I met you, going through the motions but not really living. You gave me a purpose, a reason to put down roots and build something lasting. You gave me everything, Tabitha." They kissed then, long and deep, a reaffirmation of vows spoken 9 years ago and kept faithfully ever since. The children came running out then, Thomas chasing Rebecca while James toddled behind trying to keep up, and the tender moment dissolved into laughter and play. Owen scooped up James while Tabitha caught Rebecca mid-run and Thomas wrapped himself around Owen's leg. "Tell us the story, Papa," Thomas begged. "The one about how you and Mama met." "You have heard that story 100 times," Owen protested, but he was smiling. "Please," Rebecca added her voice. "It is our favorite." So they all went inside, and Owen settled into his chair with James on his lap while Tabitha sat nearby with Rebecca leaning against her knee. Thomas sprawled on the floor at Owen's feet, looking up at his father with rapt attention. "Well," Owen began, his voice taking on the cadence of a well-practiced tale. "It was a hot August day in 1878, and I was riding toward an abandoned town called Dallas, looking for a woman who had been left behind." Tabitha listened to her husband tell their story, watched her children's faces glow with interest, and felt her heart swell with love. This was her life now, rich and full and beautiful. The grief for what she had lost would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had moved forward, had built something new and precious from the ashes of her old life. The town had left her behind, but Owen had ridden back. And together, they had created a future worth every struggle, every tear, every moment of fear and doubt. They had created a family, a home, a love that would endure for all their days and beyond. As Owen finished the story and the children clapped and demanded another, Tabitha caught her husband's eye and smiled. He smiled back, and in that moment they understood each other perfectly. They had come so far from that first meeting in an empty store, but in all the ways that mattered, they were still those same two people who had found each other against all odds, and they would continue forward together, hand in hand, for all the years to come. The years rolled on with the steady progression of seasons, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Thomas grew tall and serious, developing his father's quiet competence and his mother's sharp mind. Rebecca remained a whirlwind of energy and determination, constantly pushing boundaries and testing limits in ways that both exasperated and delighted her parents. James was the peacemaker, easygoing and kind, with a gift for making people smile. In 1890, when Thomas was 10, Rebecca was 8, and James was 6. Tabitha discovered she was pregnant again. This fourth pregnancy was harder than the previous ones, making her tired and sick in ways she had not experienced before. Owen worried constantly, hovering over her and trying to convince her to rest more. "I am fine," Tabitha insisted one morning when Owen tried to take over her breakfast preparations. "I have done this 3 times before, Owen. I know what I am doing." "You were younger then," Owen said, and immediately winced at his own words. Tabitha raised an eyebrow. "I am 34, not ancient." I know, I just want you to be careful, you and the baby both." His concern was genuine, and Tabitha's irritation faded. She went to him and took his hands. "I promise to be careful, but I also need you to trust that I know my limits." Owen sighed and kissed her forehead. "I do trust you. I just love you so much, Tabitha. The thought of anything happening to you—" "Nothing is going to happen to me," Tabitha said firmly. "I am strong, and this baby is going to be fine. We are going to be fine." The baby, another girl they named Sarah Rose Sanders, arrived in March of 1891. The labor was long and difficult, confirming Owen's fears, but Tabitha came through it safely, and Sarah was healthy and beautiful. She had dark hair like Tabitha and Thomas, but Owen's gray eyes, and from the moment she was born, she seemed to have her father wrapped around her tiny finger. 4 children, Owen marveled one night as he held Sarah while Tabitha rested. "We have 4 children. Are you complaining?" Tabitha asked with a tired smile. "Not at all. I just sometimes still cannot believe how blessed we are, how lucky I am." "We are both lucky," Tabitha said. "We found each other when we both needed it most, and look what we have built." Owen looked around the bedroom, where signs of their children were everywhere. Thomas's carefully drawn pictures on the wall, Rebecca's collection of interesting rocks on the windowsill, James's toy soldiers lined up on the dresser, and now Sarah, the newest addition to their growing family. "I love our life," Owen said simply. "Every chaotic, exhausting, wonderful moment of it." "Me too," Tabitha agreed. As the children grew older, Tabitha found herself thinking more about her past and what she wanted to preserve for the future. On a crisp autumn day in 1895, she decided it was time to write down the story of her family, both the one she had lost and the one she had built. She started with her parents and Samuel, recording everything she could remember about them. Their personalities, their dreams, the way her father's laugh had filled the store, the songs her mother used to sing. She wrote about the cholera outbreak and the abandonment of Dallas, about standing alone in that empty town and thinking her life was over. Then she wrote about Owen's arrival, about falling in love in the midst of grief, about choosing to move forward. She wrote about their wedding and the birth of each child, about the life they had created together. It took her months to complete, writing in the quiet hours after the children were asleep, but when she finished, she had a complete record of her family's story. She showed it to Owen one evening, nervous about his reaction. He read it slowly, his expression growing more emotional with each page. When he finished, he set the papers down carefully and pulled Tabitha into his arms. "This is beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you for writing this, for making sure our children and their children know where they came from." "I wanted them to know about my parents and Samuel," Tabitha said. "But I also wanted them to know how we found each other, how love can grow even in the hardest circumstances." "They will treasure this," Owen assured her. "I know I do." The children grew and changed with each passing year. Thomas, at 16, was already as tall as his father and was talking about buying his own land someday. Rebecca, at 14, had become interested in teaching and helped instruct the younger children in the area. James, at 12, showed a talent for working with animals and spent hours helping his father with the horses and cattle. And Sarah, at 4, was the darling of the family, charming everyone with her sweet nature and quick smile. In the summer of 1897, Martha and James invited the Sanders family to join them for a trip back to Dallas. The abandoned town had gained some new settlers in recent years, people trying to revive what had been lost, and Martha wanted to see if there was anything left of the original settlement. Tabitha was hesitant at first, unsure if she wanted to revisit that painful time in her life. But Owen encouraged her, and in the end, she agreed. They made the journey as a family, the children excited about the adventure even though they did not fully understand its significance. Dallas had changed. There were new buildings alongside the old ones, and new faces replacing those who had left or died. But Tabitha's father's store was still standing, now occupied by a young couple who ran it as a trading post. The cemetery was still there too, though some of the markers had weathered badly. Tabitha stood before her family's graves with Owen beside her, and their children gathered around. Thomas was old enough to understand what he was seeing, and his face was solemn. Rebecca held Sarah's hand, keeping her little sister close. James stood between his parents, looking thoughtful. "These are my parents," Tabitha told her children, her voice steady despite the emotion welling in her chest. "John and Margaret Everett, and this is my brother Samuel. They died when I was 22 during the cholera outbreak. I stayed here alone for weeks, unable to leave them, until your father came and showed me that I could honor their memory while still building a future." "Tell us about them," Thomas said quietly, so Tabitha did. She told them about John Everett's kindness and his belief that every customer was a neighbor. She told them about Margaret's beautiful voice and her skill in the garden. She told them about Samuel's dream of becoming a doctor, about his curiosity and his gentle heart. "They would have loved you all so much," Tabitha said, looking at each of her children in turn. "They would have been proud of the people you are becoming." Owen put his arm around her, and Tabitha leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence as she always had. The children stood quietly, processing what they had learned, and Tabitha felt something shift inside her. She had carried the grief for her lost family for nearly 20 years, but standing here now with Owen and their children, she felt a sense of peace she had not known was possible. Her parents and Samuel were gone, but their legacy lived on in the stories she had told, in the values she had passed to her children. And the love she had shared with them had not died but had transformed, becoming part of the love she now poured into her own family. They stayed in Dallas for 2 days, exploring the old town and meeting some of the new residents. The young couple running the trading post were fascinated to learn that Tabitha's father had originally built the store, and they invited the whole family for dinner. It was strange for Tabitha to sit in the building she had grown up in, seeing it changed yet familiar, but it was also healing in a way she had not expected. On their last evening in Dallas, Tabitha and Owen walked through the town alone while Martha and James watched the children. They stopped in front of the old general store, and Tabitha looked up at the building in the fading light. "I was so angry when the town decided to leave," she said quietly. "I felt abandoned and betrayed, but looking back now, I understand why they went. They were scared and they were trying to protect their families. I cannot fault them for that." "Do you regret staying?" Owen asked. "Even for those few weeks," Tabitha thought about it. "No," she said finally. "If I had left with them, I would never have met you. Everything would have been different. And as much as I miss my family, as much as I wish they were still alive, I cannot regret the life I have built. I cannot regret you or our children or everything we have together." Owen pulled her close, and they stood together in the twilight, two people who had found each other in the ruins of an abandoned town and built something beautiful from the wreckage of loss. The trip to Dallas marked a turning point for Tabitha. When they returned to Austin, she felt lighter, as if laying her past to rest had freed her to fully embrace her present. She threw herself into her family and community with renewed energy, and Owen noticed the change. "You seem different," he commented one night as they prepared for bed. "Happier, maybe, or more settled." "I think I am," Tabitha agreed. "Going back to Dallas, seeing how it has changed, it helped me put everything in perspective. I spent so long holding on to the past, afraid that if I let go, I would lose my family all over again. But I realize now that I will never lose them, not really. They are part of me, part of who I am and who our children are. I can carry them with me while still living fully in the present." Owen smiled and kissed her. "I am glad. You deserve to be happy, Tabitha. You have always deserved that." The years continued their steady march forward. Thomas married at 21 to a sweet girl named Anne from a neighboring ranch, and Tabitha became a grandmother for the first time in 1902 when Anne gave birth to a boy they named after both his grandfathers, Owen John Sanders. Holding her grandson for the first time, Tabitha was struck by the continuity of life, the way each generation built upon the foundation laid by those who came before. She thought about her parents, about how they would have delighted in this great-grandson, and she whispered a silent promise to them that she would tell Owen John about them, that their memory would live on. Rebecca surprised everyone by deciding not to marry, at least not yet. She got a teaching certificate and opened a small school on the Sanders property, educating children from the surrounding ranches. She was good at it, patient but firm, and Tabitha was proud of her daughter's independence. James married at 19 to a girl he had known since childhood, and they settled on a piece of land Owen helped them buy adjacent to the Sanders property. Sarah, now 11, was already showing signs of her father's quiet strength and her mother's determination. In 1903, Owen and Tabitha celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together friends and family from across Texas. The house was full of people, laughter, and music, and at one point, Tabitha found herself standing in the kitchen, looking out at the celebration, overwhelmed by gratitude. Owen came up beside her, slipping his hand into hers. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything," Tabitha said. "How far we have come, how blessed we are. 25 years ago, I was standing in an empty town, convinced my life was over, and now look at this. Look at what we have built." "We have had a good life," Owen agreed, "a very good life." "Do you have any regrets?" Tabitha asked. "About staying with me, about everything that followed." Owen turned to face her fully, his gray eyes serious. "Not a single one. Tabitha, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children and this life we have created together. I would not change a single moment of it." Tabitha smiled up at her husband, seeing the truth in his eyes. "I love you, Owen Sanders, just as much today as I did 25 years ago, maybe more." "I love you too," Owen said, and kissed her right there in the kitchen, not caring who might see. The party continued late into the night, and as Tabitha danced with Owen under the stars, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. The town had left her behind, but Owen had ridden back. And in doing so, he had brought her forward into a life richer and more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, multiple generations brought together by the love that had started in an abandoned town in 1878. And as Tabitha looked around at all the faces, young and old, familiar and beloved, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The story that had begun in grief and loss had transformed into one of love and hope and lasting legacy. And though the years would continue to pass, though more changes and challenges would come, Tabitha knew that she and Owen would face them together, just as they always had. Their love had weathered every storm and celebrated every joy. It had built a family and a home and a future worth every struggle. And it would endure, passed down through their children and grandchildren, a testament to the power of love to heal and transform and bring life from the ashes of despair. As the celebration finally wound down and the last guests departed, Tabitha and Owen stood together on their porch, as they had done countless times over the years. They were older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but the love between them was as strong as ever. "Happy anniversary, my love," Owen said softly. "Happy anniversary," Tabitha replied and leaned her head on his shoulder, content and peaceful and grateful beyond measure. The town had left her behind, but the cowboy had ridden back. And together, they had ridden forward into a life beautiful beyond imagining, a love story that would echo through generations, a legacy of hope and healing and enduring devotion. Their story was complete, their life together a testament to the transformative power of love. And as they stood together in the quiet Texas night, surrounded by everything they had built, they knew that this was exactly how it was meant to be.